Fallout today after that explosive testimony from a pair of whistleblowers. And we'll get to that in a moment. Before we go forward with that, Jason, I do want to get your take on what's happening on Capitol Hill. And we will dip back into that meeting momentarily.
First of all, I never thought the Democrats would go after a Kennedy. I never thought I'd see that day. But unbelievable that they would, in literally a hearing about censorship, they would try to censor this witness. That is unbelievable to me. They interrupted him. They wouldn't let him speak. They wanted to move to executive session. They did everything they could to censor a guy who was there to testify about censorship.
Look, not to take us too far into the weeds, but I want to understand. When a Democratic Congresswoman, Stacey Plaskett of the Virgin Islands, says that she wants to take a meeting out of the public eye into an executive forum, what does that mean exactly?
Well, she's a delegate, but she is the ranking member. Executive session is reserved solely for those things that are classified. If you have something that's highly classified or perhaps pornographic to the point of child pornography and those types of things, those two categories would allow you to move to executive session. It's subject to a vote. But what she's really trying to say is she's trying to take his words down. She's trying to censor him before he's even spoken. That's what she's trying to do.
Look, at the end of the day, what people want to know is what these witnesses, and he's on a list of witnesses, have to say about what this current administration is doing to step on free speech. And then what we see is in full display a Democratic Congresswoman, ranking member of this committee, stepping on free speech.
Vicious monsters.
Yeah, she literally is trying to suppress him before he even speaks. And that's what the administration was doing to people like Kennedy, who had 900,000 people on Instagram, and they tried to take down his account. They wouldn't allow him to do this. The core coordination between the administration and these social media companies, that needs to be exposed in its fullest, because they were using the weight of the Department of Justice to lean on these social media companies to encourage them to take down, not something that was against the law, but because they didn't like the political ramifications of what people like Kennedy and others were trying to say. It was mostly on conservatives, but here's a case where they're trying to take Kennedy down, who's asking questions about vaccines. Those were legitimate questions. They should have never been taken down.
All right, I want to move forward because there was some other kind of free speech going on, and this had to do also at a hearing that got heated. Fallout today after yesterday's explosive testimony from a couple of whistleblowers, the two IRS employees, one who says he's identifying as a gay Democrat. So he's saying, I don't have a political dog in this fight, describing in detail how the Biden Justice Department interfered with the Hunter tax investigation at every turn. Democrats in full meltdown mode as they tried to discredit the whistleblowers and shift the focus to former President Trump. Not in the room, not part of the conversation, but they tried anyway.
We can conclude that this Inspector Clouseau-style quest for something that doesn't exist has turned our committee into a theater of the absurd, an exercise in futility and embarrassment.
We are here today because Donald Trump is exerting an influence campaign.
I don't like these attacks on the Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, as if they are somehow anti-U.S. agencies. This is ludicrous. Beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life down here. None.
The whistleblowers laid out exactly how Hunter Biden got preferential treatment. Prosecutors deviated from normal procedures and slow-walked the investigation against him. They also estimated that Hunter Biden raked in some $17 million in foreign deals that they know about, and that the IRS wanted to slap him with much more serious charges than he ultimately faced. In key testimony, they said they were blocked from following up on Hunter Biden's WhatsApp messaging that seemed to directly tie Joe Biden to his son's shady deals.
This is another solicitation from Hunter Biden, and he refers to the Bidens, plural, and they're best at doing what the chairman wants. I think that's very concerning to our committee, because this is a Chinese Communist Party-owned entity. This is of concern to our national security.
With respect to the WhatsApp messages, it was something we clearly needed to follow up on, and that was really one of the major deviations from, in this case, is that investigators asked, and Special Agent Ziegler asked to follow, to take some investigative steps to review that, and it just simply wasn't supported by the prosecutors. So further delving into what that means, I just simply can't do.
Well, I can promise you we're not going to stop on this committee until we understand what he fully meant by that message to a Chinese Communist Party official.
So, Jason, what do you say about that? The WhatsApp testimony agents not allowed to pursue information on, quote unquote, I'm sitting here with my father, things that would put the two of them in the same room while their business dealings were going on.
So you have credible IRS employees that are following the money. They're looking at, potential crimes in how they dealt with these IRS claims, falsifying records, doing all sorts of things, but they're not allowed to pursue the truth. They were impeded by the FBI, the Department of Justice, and that is the core of this. These people were not allowed to do their jobs. It was an incomplete investigation. You know, Harris, next week, the judge is supposed to consider this plea deal. I don't know how a judge properly rules on a plea deal when you just had congressional testimony from IRS agents saying they were not allowed to complete their investigation. It was purely political, something these people have never seen in their investigative careers, and it directly ties Joe Biden and the Biden family to corruption and money that is flowing from these overseas entities. Remember, they have more than 20 entities, no products, no services, and millions of dollars flowing to the Bidens, and yet these guys couldn't go and pursue it to its fullest.
I mean, and what you're pointing to as well is the fact that if we knew all of this before, would that deal even be in place? The judge could reject it. I've been told by legal experts it would be a rare thing to happen, but we'll cover it and see what that judge does. Real quickly, how exactly do we know was the Biden family protected in the investigation? Who was deeply behind it? What was learned?
I think there were very specific. I think when they talked about, they met with the prosecutors, they were unanimous in their decision that they were making a recommendation to do it. But the very specific testimony that was given previously in transcribed interviews and there at the witnesses table today, when they said you cannot ask questions about Hunter's dad. You can't ask questions about who the big guy is. You can't ask questions about the $10,000. When they can't ask a simple question, and remember, they never got to interview Hunter Biden because Hunter Biden was tipped off. When do you ever hear about the IRS getting thwarted in their ability to actually interview witnesses? They couldn't do that in this case.
Wow, tipped off. And Biden's transition team was tipped off. That's confounding to me, since apparently he didn't know anything about anything. Good to see you. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.